Journalism is a science and an art. Being a journalist requires specific skills, training and attitude. Too often in modern times, the title journalist is used by those without a proper understanding of the responsibilities that come with it. Just as much as working at a hospital doesn't make one a doctor, being involved in the media industry doesn't make one a journalist. Journalists are serious professionals who dedicate their lives to protect the people's right to know. They are students of communication and information. They are students of economics, politics, history, philosophy and a myriad subjects that are the bedrock of professional journalism. Today, as the world marks Media Freedom Day, News First recognizes the journalists who wage an untiring battle against corruption, violence and oppression and often pay a very steep price. Today is a day that we recognize true professional journalism and its vital importance in a healthy, vibrant democracy.
News First with the people.
What's happening around the world and what's happening here at home? A very good evening to you and welcome to Primetime News. I'm Sandro Ferdinando. Let's take a look at your headlines for tonight.
"700 dengue cases recorded in 3 days. Dengue high-risk zones declared across 15 districts. Sri Lanka's debt restructuring blueprint in May, says State Minister. Litro gas reduces the price of domestic gas products. Sri Lanka braces for heavy rainfall during weekend."
The Kremlin has said that Russia reserves the right to retaliate anywhere and anytime it deems necessary in response to the drone attack on President Vladimir Putin's residence.
Russia said it downed 2 drones that targeted the Kremlin in Moscow last night and accused Ukraine of attempting to kill President Vladimir Putin. Unverified footage on social media appeared to show an object flying over the Kremlin before a small explosion. Ukraine said it had nothing to do with the drone strike. Russian officials said 2 Ukrainian drones attempted to strike the Kremlin, but the raid was thwarted. Putin's office said the president was not hurt in what they called a terrorist attack and the Kremlin complex did not suffer any damage. Putin's spokesperson told foreign media that the Russian leader was not in the Kremlin when the raid happened. The attack took place as Russia prepared for Victory Day celebrations on the 9th of May. The centerpiece of the commemoration of the victory against Nazi Germany and its allies in World War II is the annual military parade on Red Square just outside the Kremlin walls. Russian news agencies quoted the Kremlin as saying that the parade would go ahead as planned.
Moving on to news here at home, a tragic accident at a railway crossing in Valigama claimed 3 lives, including those of 2 children.
2 school children and a 3-wheeler driver died when a 3-wheeler crashed onto a moving train at the Peradeniya railway crossing in Valigama on Wednesday afternoon. Sri Lanka police said the 3-wheeler crashed onto the Mathura Kandy train and 5 people were travelling in the ill-fated 3-wheeler at the time. They were a mother, her 3 children and the driver of the 3-wheeler. 2 children aged 7 and 9 died on the spot along with the 3-wheeler driver. The mother and her other 12-year-old son were rushed to hospital due to the serious nature of their injuries.
Sri Lanka's Ministry of Health says there is a high risk of dengue spreading across the country due to the inclement weather situation. So far this year, 25 dengue-related deaths have been reported while 700 dengue cases were recorded in the past 3 days.
A total of 55 MOH divisions across 15 districts have been identified as dengue high-risk zones. MOH divisions in the Colombo, Gampaha, Kalutara, Kandy, Mathale, Hambantota, Galle, Mathara, Jaffna, Batiklo, Trincomalee, Putlam, Kurunagala, Kegol and Ratnapura districts have been identified as dengue high-risk zones. Over 30,000 dengue cases have been reported in the country so far in 2023.
මෙම රෝගීන්ගෙන් 50%ක්ම වාර්තා වෙන්නේ බස්නාහිර පළාත තුලින්.
50% of the dengue cases are recorded from the Western Province. 25% of them are school children, while 62% belong to the workforce between the ages of 20 and 55. We have observed a rapid increase in the number of dengue cases reported this year. We recorded 2,000 cases per week. This is not a figure that can be accommodated by the hospitals. The situation would be worse with the increase in rainfall. The public should also take measures to prevent the spread of dengue. We need to remove and destroy places conducive for mosquito breeding. We need to protect our children using mosquito nets or ointments. If you come down with fever, it is important to seek immediate medical attention. Sri Lanka State Minister of Finance Dr. Ranjit Siamalapitiya said a blueprint on restructuring the country's debt will be announced within this month.
The central bank has announced that a clear plan will be introduced this morning on restructuring debt. The government will announce it. All decisions will benefit the country.
Cabinet spokesperson Minister Bandala Gunawardena said that no final decision was reached with regard to the domestic debt restructuring.
Domestic debt restructuring is something that is being discussed widely. It was said that a final decision would be reached in April, as per the presentation made by the central bank to the investors. What is the latest development on domestic debt restructuring? We have not reached a final decision. Various factions are trying to create unnecessary fear by claiming that the funds in deposits will be in danger and the EPF will be depleted. Those are nothing but talk. We are engaged in a series of expert discussions. The external debt restructuring process is yet to be finalized. In addition, the President said that when it comes to domestic debt restructuring, the EPF beneficiaries will not be at a disadvantage. The respective committees have been vested with the responsibility to strategically look at this.
Foreign Minister Ali Sabri PC said that Sri Lanka is confident in restructuring the debt. He was speaking to Channel News Asia on the sidelines of the 56th annual meeting of the Board of Governors of the Asian Development Bank in South Korea.
We are also very happy that the multilateral agencies like IMF, World Bank, ADB had given us a lending hand. So with that, I think yes, this year there could be a recession further, but from next year onward, should be able to see some sort of growth. And we are looking at by 2027 debt sustainability to return, and then with that probably we'll have access to the financial market. By that time, we should be able to restart paying our debts as an obligation apart from the multilaterals.
Are you on track to completing the debt restructuring process in time for the first review in September? That's about 4 months away.
Yeah, fingers crossed that we have made a lot of progress as far as the prior actions are taken before the EFF was approved. All the prior actions, except some minor ones, have been controlled, and as you very clearly see, we have introduced price-sensitive, cost-reflective pricing in so many areas, and SOE reforms are on the card, and tax reforms have come into play. So there is a sense of stability in the country, and we have eliminated all sorts of queues and the shortages. One thing is very clear on our mind, that any debt restructuring should be equal treatment for all. It has to be a kind of a universal same application or debt relief or otherwise. So we are confident, just like we managed to secure the debt restructuring assurances from our friends and the creditors, we should be able to restructure it.
General Secretary of the Sri Lanka Freedom Party, Dayasiri Jayasekaara, called for the exercise of caution when acting on domestic debt.
If domestic debt restructuring is implemented, it will affect the EPF and the ETF. It would impact the savings of the people. Since the President's speech to Parliament, the Colombo Stock Exchange suffered negatively for 11 days straight. No one can physically control the country's economy. I request for necessary action to be taken.
Sri Lanka's Cabinet of Ministers have decided to raise the limit on issuance of treasury bills up to 6 trillion rupees, and the proposal will be tabled in Parliament in the future. Earlier, the limit on issuance of treasury bills approved by the Parliament was 5 trillion rupees.
According to the Cabinet spokesperson, the debt ceiling for treasury bills have been increased to about 6 trillion rupees. The reason most likely would be every year generally the debt ceiling is being increased. The reason is because the government has to raise money for pay interest as well as their recurrent expenditure. So as a result, they have to constantly increase the debt ceiling, and our revenue is also not adequate to cover our expenditure. At the same time, it doesn't also mean that the government is also planning to raise about 1 trillion overnight. They have increased the ceiling. Most likely with the requirement for their expenditure, they will raise money phase wise. The interest rates are very high. Even the government goes for a treasury bill auction, they have to pay a very high interest rate on short run.
Supreme Court has decided to call a fundamental rights application filed by the Jatika Janabalawegaya against the postponement of the local government elections. Accordingly, the fundamental rights application will be called for support on the 9th of June.
The fundamental rights petition by the Jatika Janabalawegaya was called up on Wednesday in the presence of Supreme Court Justices Murdu Fernando, Bhuwanekalu Vihare, Priyantha Jayawardena, Vijit Malalgoda and EAGR Amarasekara. The fundamental rights petition was filed by parliamentarian Harina Amarasuriya, former parliamentarian Sunil Handunnetti and the Secretary of the Jatika Janabalawegaya, Dr. Nihal Abesingha. The Cabinet, the Treasury Secretary, former Secretary of the Ministry of Public Administration and Management Neil Hapuhinna, Government Printer Ganga Kalpani Lianage and the Inspector General of Police, among others, were named as respondents.
The local government elections were first scheduled to be held on the 9th of March, and then it was postponed to the 25th of April. According to the provisions in the Election Act, the Election Commission can only postpone an election after rescheduling it to be held within 21 days of the initial proposed date. Some think that the elections have been postponed indefinitely. We now have enough proof to show that Ranil Wickremesinghe postponed this not because the government didn't have enough funds, but because he didn't have enough votes. We now have details of the income that flowed into the treasury during the months of February and March. This income surpasses all circulars issued by Ranil Wickremesinghe himself. There are enough funds in the treasury, but they are not holding the local government elections. We have named all the respondents now. The East attack case has now set a judicial precedent in this country that allows you to punish public officers as well as the political authority. This case will be a precedent for this fundamental rights application we filed today.
Members of the ruling faction now claim that Ranil Wickremesinghe restabilized the country and saved us from bankruptcy. If that is true, there is no issue in holding an election now. There is no point of talking about a presidential election. First hold the election that's already being announced.
Today we celebrate World Press Freedom Day under the theme Shaping a Future of Rights, Freedom of Expression as a Driver for All Other Human Rights. Hailed as the fourth pillar of democracy, journalists have time and time again risked their lives and reputation to reveal the truth behind an incident, event, or scandal.
World Press Freedom Day was first established in 1993 following the recommendation of the General Conference of UNESCO. This day has been named as a Press Freedom Day to commemorate the Colombian journalist Guillermo Cano, who was brutally murdered in front of his newspaper office on December 17, 1986. According to the International Federation of Journalists, journalists worldwide are facing the most challenging times. Recent reports indicate that 929 journalists have been killed globally over the past 10 years. Iraq is the most dangerous country for journalists, followed by Syria. Sri Lanka has also been adversely affected by the threats to press freedom in recent decades.
this political class is involved in all the killings, attacks and suppression of media freedom in Sri Lanka. So very difficult to think that without a systemic change for democracy that we will ever see a justice for the crimes against media and journalists in Sri Lanka. On the other hand, as I said, we need a comprehensive approach which involves people's other freedoms as well.
In an environment where investigations on the assassination of journalists, assault and intimidation are yet to be completed, the biggest threat to the media is to be brought via new legislations. The proposed anti-terrorism bill contains clauses that could lead to the imprisonment of journalists, fines and the confiscation of assets. While there is strong public opposition towards this bill, the government is attempting to introduce a Broadcasting Authority Act to interfere with the media operations.
What we see in Sri Lankan government is using whatever tools they can use to suppress people's freedom of expression. And in that sense, we need to have a comprehensive approach, even including the right to expression is right to vote is right to expression.
An event to celebrate the World Press Freedom Day took place in Colombo today. The event was organised by the Free Media Movement and Sri Lanka Press Institute.
I had a look back on the journalists that were murdered in this country and the justice that was served to the victims of these incidents. Justice was never served to any of them except for an incident where some burglar entered into a house of a journalist. The government failed to find out what happened to Poddala Jayantha, Lasantha Wickramatunga, Eknaligoda and Sivaram when they had ample evidence on these incidents. The reason for this was never the inability or the incompetency of these government institutes. The reason for this delay was the unlawful implementation of immunity.
A press conference was organised by the Young Men's Buddhist Association in Colombo on Wednesday, where the anti-terrorism bill came under strong criticism.
What this bill seeks to achieve is to produce a docile and passive citizenry, not active or politically assertive citizens. And secondly, in the absence of effective safeguards to protect the citizens' rights and freedoms, this law will open up the floodgates of police and political abuse of power. Police and political abuse of power. Effectively creating in Sri Lanka a police state.
We saw during the Aragalaya how this law can be weaponized, can be used as a weapon against anyone and everyone. We should be drafting laws in our country for the good of the people. The excuse can't be, well, the European Union is telling us, because Sri Lanka is also a member of the United Nations. We have ratified many treaties that require us to protect the rights of all citizens. Today is World Press Freedom Day. This law would also undermine and prevent media freedom. So here what they're trying to do is they're trying to legalize and normalize the involvement of military in policing.
Originally said it was only going to be for about 3 years. 6 months. 6 months to start with, and then it went on for 3 years. The reason that the act was supposed to be a temporary piece of law is because it was such a terrible piece of legislation. It had the potential to curtail rights and freedoms, and it was treated very much as an exceptional piece of legislation, required only to give a response, only to be a response to a heightened threat perceived by the government of the day. In seeking to replace that, we also need to understand what was so bad about it. Replacing the PTA, what has been brought is the ATA, which I say in reading the provisions, continues the same scheme of exceptional powers to the President, actually advances the powers of the President in this Act, and continues the exceptional powers of the law enforcement and the military. So we have not changed, we have in fact increased.
The Joint Opposition Alliance met with heads of media organizations today.
The opposition leader and several other opposition political parties participated in this meeting, which took place in Colombo. Several political parties of the opposition have now reached a consensus to work together as a massive force against the anti-democratic acts carried out by the government, and this meeting was held centering the movement.
We have reached a consensus to oppose the Broadcasting Authority Act, which is proposed by the government with the intention of curtailing media freedom in the country. Then we have also reached a consensus on what we are going to do with regard to the proposed anti-terrorism bill, which is brought as an alternative to the existing Prevention of Terrorism Act. Then we, the opposition, have come together to stand against the corrupt deals that are ongoing concerning the Express Pearl disaster. This meeting is a result of several suggestions that came from the political parties representing the opposition of this country. Today, we expect to have a fruitful discussion with you all, which will do a benefit to the country and its people.
Parliamentarian Imtiaz Bakir Marker was appointed as the convener of the Joint Opposition Alliance.
ඔබතුමාලා එකඟතාවයකට ආපු කරුණු කාරණා මොනවද? ලියවිල්ලක් මත පදනම්වද මේ විපක්ෂයේ සන්ධානයේ ගොඩනගන්නේ? ඒ නිශ්චිත වූ කාරණා මොනවද කියලා අපිට පැහැදිලි කිරීමක් කරන්න පුළුවන්ද? ආරම්භය හොඳ සාකච්ඡා.
In the beginning, we will have several roundtable discussions on different matters. We are not telling that we have reached a consensus on all matters. You can pick a party and a government during an election. What we expect here is to come together and form a strong alliance to stand against the suppression carried out by the government on media and to protect the fundamental rights of the people. In battling these issues, we need to form a broad national opposition alliance. There can be different groups within this alliance. We need to discuss about it. We have now reached a point where we can come to a common consensus. Even the world is moving towards it now.
Nama Rajapaksa, chairman of the National Council Subcommittee on identifying the priorities in formulation of short, medium and long-term national policies of the National Council, says that the draft bill on the National Policy Commission will be tabled in Parliament soon.
The roadmap for the establishment of the National Policy Commission was discussed at the National Council Subcommittee on identifying priorities and formulating short, medium and long-term policies held recently under the chairmanship of MP Nama Rajapaksa. The progress of the recommendations given in the previous meetings regarding the use of electronic technology in the procurement process of all government institutions was also discussed. Accordingly, by June this year, it is planned to be implemented on a trial basis for several cabinet ministries and state ministries. Journalists raised questions over the presence of Basil Rajapaksa at the SLPP May Day rally.
දැන් ඔබතුමාලගේ මේ රැළියේදී මේ බසිල් රාජපක්ෂ මහත්තයා ඉවෙන්ට් එකට ඇතුල් වීමත් තිබුණා මහින්ද රාජපක්ෂ මහත්මයා වගේම ඒකට ඇතුල් වුණා කියලා නිකන් එහෙම පොඩි ගතියක් තිබුණා. ඒ වගේම අත් දෙක උස්සලා පොඩි එහෙම මූවමන්ට් එකක් දීලා එහෙම පොඩි නිකන් එහෙම එකක් ඒ මොකක්ද ඇත්තට මේකෙන් මොකක් හරි අලුත් PVC-මක්ද මොකක්ද මේ ගොඩක් අය එහෙම කතා කරන ගත්ත එළියේ.
දැන් ඔක්කොම සැකෙන්නේ බලන්න.
Basil Rajapaksa is the founder of the party. He is the second in command while Mahinda Rajapaksa is the leader. So he will raise his hands and enter the premises because he too is a leader. The same goes for China and Russia as well. The same respect was given to the Prime Minister as well. Do not be suspicious to assume that something new is in the works. This is normal.
Meanwhile, the National Nutritional Policy 2021 to 2023 was launched at BMICH.
The National Nutritional Policy 2021-2023 launch was attended by many officials of the health sector, including the Director General of Health Services, Dr. Asela Gunawardena, Deputy Director General of Public Health Services, Dr. Susie Pereira, alongside dignitaries of UNICEF.
We had a policy on nutrition, so we are in the process of reformulating it, but this adds another hurdle for that. Ministry of Health has developed a comprehensive nutrition policy that aims to improve the nutritional status of all Sri Lankans, especially who are most vulnerable. The policy document emphasizes the need for health and nutrition security for all the citizens. Cooperation of all stakeholders with multi-sector action plan is crucial to end all forms of malnutrition.
The National Nutritional Policy 2021-2023 was presented to the respective dignitaries.
Sri Lanka's foreign minister told international media that no one will be allowed to use Sri Lanka as a military hub or a port for anyone.
Mr. Sabri, talking about that port investment, Beijing will invest even more money in the logistics complex at Colombo port. It is your first major foreign investment since the default. How confident are you of the benefits this will bring to the economy versus the risks that some say could leave you more indebted to Beijing?
Then we don't agree with that, because most of this investment are not debt-free. That is not, we are not taking any debt. These are investment, in fact. So in fact, if you look at that, 70% of that investment comes from the Beijing, and then 20% by the Sri Lanka Ports Authority and 10% of Sri Lankan company of the particular project what you are talking. And the port city itself is not a single rupee or a dollar had been borrowed on that. That's an investment. That's the kind of investment we are looking forward. I don't think in the short to medium term we are not going to borrow any longer and go and invest on infrastructure projects which are not conducive for return, and that there is a possibility for us to repay. So we are very careful. I think we have learned our lesson. We are a friendly country. We are open to do business with east, south and west. So that is how we are. So I'm sure on the long run, that's what we are looking forward to.
With China investing in the Colombo port, there's an additional concern, largely from the US and India, about China giving a naval advantage in the Indian Ocean with greater access to Sri Lanka's ports. How will your country navigate this power rivalry? And allay fears your ports could be used for military purposes.
So that's out of the question. We will not allow anyone to use Sri Lanka as a military hub or a port for anyone. That is very, very clear. What we have is a commercial arrangement. We are open to do business with north and south. Traditionally, Sri Lanka had never ever taken sides and been part of any blocs. So that we want to continue to remain so. Most of these relationships are commercial. If you look at Colombo port, investment are there. Adanis are building one terminal. Chinese are operating another one. They are expanding it. We have given another option for Japanese and the US to invest on that. So we are open to do business with everybody.
Meanwhile, China Merchants Group plans to build the Hambantota port into a logistics and an industrial base.
The chairman of the China Merchants Group, China's largest diversified conglomerate, who was on a visit to Sri Lanka, says the group's latest investment plans will up its accumulative investments in the island to reach nearly $2 billion. Chairman Miao Jianmin, who is on his first visit to the country, attended a signing and ribbon-cutting ceremony held at the Hambantota International Port for 15 projects. The China Merchants Group, which entered the Sri Lankan market in 2008, accumulated a total investment of $1.68 billion as at the beginning of 2023. The group has just signed another investment agreement with the Sri Lankan government with plans to invest $400 million to build a modern logistics centre in Colombo. The new development will up China Merchants Group's accumulated investment in Sri Lanka to reach over $2 billion, making it the largest foreign investment enterprise in the island. Chairman Miao Jianmin said that China Merchants Group will continue to increase investments in Sri Lanka and plans to build Hambantota International Port into an imported logistics centre, an industrial base on the island as well as the Indian Ocean region.
Litrogas announced that the prices of cooking gas produced will be revised.
Litrogas said that LP gas prices will be reduced with effect from midnight on Wednesday. The price of a 12.5 kilogram gas cylinder will be reduced by 100 rupees to 3,638 rupees. The price of a 5 kilogram gas cylinder will be reduced by 40 rupees to 1,462 rupees, and the price of a 2.3 kilogram gas cylinder will be reduced by 19 rupees to 681 rupees. Love's Gas said it would not increase the prices of its products even if the global prices spike. Power and Energy Minister Kanchana Wijesekara said the electricity tariffs will be reviewed and revised by July 2023, keeping in line with the government policy and cabinet decisions taken in December 2022. This is to implement a cost-reflective pricing mechanism and to review and revise electricity prices biannually in January and July of every year.
The ward complex at the Department of Oral, Maxillofacial and Oral Surgery at the University of Peradeniya Teaching Hospital, which was renovated and upgraded by government, that was vested with the public today.
This is the Peradeniya Teaching Hospital. Thousands of Sri Lankans living in Kandy and its suburbs and many more from the surrounding villages who cannot make it to Colombo obtain services from Sri Lanka's free healthcare system at this hospital. The Peradeniya Teaching Hospital is also where doctors who render a great service to the country's healthcare system obtain their training. Unfortunately, the ward complex at the Department of Oral, Maxillofacial and Oral Surgery at the University of Peradeniya Teaching Hospital was not subject to any renovation over the years. This, in turn, inconvenienced the health staff and the patients alike. A request was forwarded to Gammadda for a fresh coat of paint for the ward and for the restoration of the break room used by doctors, and thus the project to upgrade the premises launched on the 10th of December 2022. The project also included the installation of new equipment at the ward complex, and all this was made possible by a kind donation from Next Manufacturing Private Limited. The renovated and upgraded ward complex at the Department of Oral, Maxillofacial and Oral Surgery was opened in the presence of Shivan Daniel of the Gammadda movement, Professor Terence Mudajith, the Deputy Vice Chancellor of the University of Peradeniya, Professor Upul Bandara Disanayaka, the former Chancellor of the University of Peradeniya, General Manager for Human Resources of Next Manufacturing Private Limited, Bharata Amrasinghe, Gammadda National Organizer Kenneth Virakudi, among others.
There are times that the people have said that inform Gammadda if an issue goes unresolved. Such is the love given to this program by the people. Gammadda has developed to a level where it is in a position to provide resources to agencies that should get state support.
Next Manufacturing Private Limited was represented by its General Manager for Human Resources.
Gammadda is in fact doing what should be done by the government. I am pleased to have witnessed the transparent process adopted by everyone here. I wish Gammadda the best to continue with such endeavours because this is something that has reached the hearts of the people.
Shivan Daniel from the Gammadda movement stressed on the importance of free healthcare.
Today, as we upgrade and renovate this teaching hospital, the world marks Press Freedom Day. Free media and free healthcare is like the air we breathe. As long as it is available, we may not understand its value. In Sri Lanka, the free healthcare system has very ancient roots. While even in some of the most developed nations in the world, ordinary citizens struggle desperately to meet healthcare bills. Sri Lanka was different, but today things have changed. We, as a nation, decided that our system is free healthcare. It is important to protect free healthcare because it is our culture and it is our history.
ආරක්ෂා කරගන්න. හැබැයි අපේ රටේ එහෙම තත්ත්වයක් තිබුණේ නැහැ. අද ටිකක් වෙනස් වෙලා. නමුත් සංකල්පයක් හැටියට අපි තීරණයක් ගත්තා. අපේ රටේ මිනිසුන්ට අපි නිදහස් සෞඛ්‍යයක් ලබා දෙනවායි කියලා. මම හිතන්නේ ඒක ගොඩක් වැදගත්. මොකද අපේ සංස්කෘතිය එහෙමයි. අපේ ඉතිහාසය එහෙමයි.
Sri Lanka's free healthcare system delivers a plethora of benefits to the public. It is our responsibility to ensure that the benefits of free healthcare are delivered to the people without any interruption. Today, Gammadda proved through action that is not simply just a responsibility.
රට නගන ජන පෞර.
The Meteorology Department states that rainfall will increase during the upcoming weekend.
By studying the data we have collected so far, we have identified that an atmospheric disturbance is developing in the lower atmosphere of the Bay of Bengal, which is located right above the eastern coast of the island. Due to this atmospheric disturbance in the lower atmosphere, we expect the rainfall to increase in the southwestern parts of the island during the 7th, 8th and 9th. There is a chance of temporary localized strong winds as well due to this atmospheric disturbance, which will affect the wind patterns which are blowing across the country. This will have an indirect effect on the country's weather.
මෙවැනි තත්ත්වයක් ඇතිවීමේ හැකියාවක් තියෙනවා. හැබැයි මේකේ වක්‍ර බලපෑම තමයි දිවෙන්ට බලපාන්නේ.
The earth slip near the 12th mile post on the Namanukula Passara road was reported on Tuesday night. Locals in the area were severely affected since Wednesday morning as transportation along the road came to a complete standstill. Sri Lanka police requested locals to use alternative routes to reach their respective destinations. The landslide early warnings issued to 3 districts were extended once again on Wednesday evening. The National Building Research Organisation said the early warnings were issued to the Badulla, Kegol and Matara districts. Early landslide warnings were issued to the Haldamulla and Passara divisional secretariats in the Badulla district and the Kegol divisional secretariat in the Kegol district. Landslide warnings were issued to the Kotapola and Paskoda divisional secretariats of the Matara district as well.
Tonight on our special segment leading to Vesak, we take a look at the Totalanga Vesak Pandal.
Whenever someone speaks of Totalanga, the first thing that comes to a person's mind is the massive Vesak Pandal that is constructed during the Vesak season. Among thousands of pandals in Sri Lanka, the Totalanga Pandal takes a special place as it is a pioneer of modern pandal art. News First decided to trace the history of this majestic work of art. The Totalanga Pandal was first built as a majestic work of art in 1955. It represented the story of Mahabhadra Kalpa. While researching the history of the Totalanga Pandal, it was revealed that a pandal had been built at the same place even before 1955. The Totalanga Vaishaka Loka Society is as old as the Totalanga Pandal. It is challenging today as well as then to find the logs to create the pandal structure. According to the elders in the community, the logs were brought to Totalanga from areas out of Colombo through the Kalini River.
රුවන් ඇල්ලේ ඉඳලා යටියන් තුරේ ඉඳලා තමයි මේක තුරනට පුවක් පවුරු දෙකක් ගේනවා. එක පවුරක පුවක් කොට 100ක් විතර ගහලා ගේන්නේ. ඒක ඔක්කොම ඇදලා ගොඩ දාන්නේ අපි හිටියේ ඒ කාලේ අපි කට්ටිය තමයි ඔක්කොම මේ වැඩේ කරන්නේ. අවුරුදු 13කට කලින් මේ තොරණ ප්‍රදර්ශනය කරද්දී එක දිනයි ප්‍රදර්ශනය කරන්න හම්බුනේ තොරණ කඩාගෙන වැටුණා. අපේ ඉන්න තරුණ පිරිස් අපේ වැඩිහිටියෝ සියලු දෙනාම එකතු වෙලා මේ තොරණ නැවත ඉදි කරලා නැවතත් ප්‍රදර්ශනය කරන්න අපිට ශක්තිය ලැබුණා.
The Totalanga Pandal is built for the 68th time this year, and it represents the Mahasupinu Jataka based on the 16 dreams of King Kosol.
And with that, wrap up news for tonight. Thank you very much for joining us. Do take care and good night.